Welcome to Michigan Beekeeping Laws, your complete regulatory guide. If you're considering starting an apiary in Michigan, or you already keep bees and want to ensure you're fully compliant with regulations, you're in the right place. Michigan's beekeeping landscape is unique. It combines state protections with local control in ways that can seem complex at first. But breaking it down systematically, you'll discover a framework designed to balance agricultural freedom with neighborhood harmony. In this episode, we'll walk through every layer of regulation you need to understand: state law, municipal codes, property restrictions, and the specific practices that keep you protected. By the end, you'll know exactly what applies to your situation. Let's start with the foundation: Michigan's Right to Farm Act, or RTFA. This state law provides significant protections for beekeepers who follow generally accepted agricultural and management practices. We call them GAMPs. When you operate according to these practices, you gain substantial legal protection against nuisance lawsuits and certain local restrictions. But here's the critical distinction: RTFA protection doesn't create blanket immunity from all local regulations. It doesn't override all zoning ordinances. What it does is shield you when you're operating as a legitimate farm operation following state-approved practices. Cities and townships can still regulate where agricultural activities occur through zoning ordinances, especially in densely populated residential areas. The key legal distinction is this: authorities can regulate the location of agriculture, but they can't prohibit it entirely if you're following GAMPs. Now, local zoning requirements vary dramatically across Michigan municipalities. Some cities have specific beekeeping ordinances with detailed rules about minimum lot sizes, maximum colony numbers, or setback distances. Others have no bee-specific regulations at all. This means your first step should always be contacting your local zoning administrator to determine what, if any, beekeeping ordinances apply in your area. Urban and suburban areas face the most complex situations. Cities like Ann Arbor, Grand Rapids, and Detroit have adopted detailed beekeeping ordinances. These typically specify maximum numbers of hives based on property size. Minimum distances your hives must be from property lines, usually 10 to 25 feet, fence or vegetation barrier requirements, water source provisions within a certain distance, and hive registration with local authorities. These local ordinances apply regardless of RTFA protection. They're considered reasonable regulations of agricultural location rather than outright prohibitions. By contrast, rural beekeepers generally encounter fewer restrictions. Though township codes may still include agricultural setback requirements or require conditional use permits for commercial operations. One often overlooked layer of regulation comes from private agreements. Property deed restrictions and homeowners association rules can prohibit or restrict beekeeping even where local ordinances allow it. This is crucial. RTFA protection does not override private contractual agreements, so before you invest in equipment or hives, review your property documents carefully. Check your deed for any restrictions. If you live in an HOA community, review those covenants thoroughly. Some associations have explicitly prohibited beekeeping. Others require board approval. Some have no rules about it at all. Getting this wrong can mean expensive fines or legal action, regardless of what the city says. So this step, reviewing your private property documents, is absolutely foundational. Many beekeepers skip it and regret that decision later. Understanding Michigan's registration requirements is your next critical step. Michigan doesn't require statewide registration for all beekeepers, but certain situations trigger mandatory reporting to the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development, MDARD. Voluntary registration with MDARD offers significant benefits even when not required. Registered beekeepers receive notifications about disease outbreaks, pesticide applications in their area, and changes to state regulations. The department maintains a voluntary apiary registry that helps track colony health and coordinate response to emerging threats. You must register with MDARD in these specific situations: if you sell bees, queens, or packaged bees commercially; if you move colonies across state lines; if you maintain more than a certain number of colonies — the threshold varies by local ordinance; or if you apply for RTFA protection for a commercial operation; or if you participate in certain agricultural programs or receive farm subsidies. Commercial beekeepers who sell honey, beeswax products, or pollination services don't automatically require state registration unless they're also selling live bees. However, many choose voluntary registration to demonstrate their commitment to best management practices and to stay informed about industry issues. Here's a practical tip. Even if registration isn't required by law, maintain detailed records of your colonies. Document acquisition dates, sources, and health treatments. These records prove invaluable during inspections and help you track your operation's success. State apiary inspectors from MDARD conduct both routine and complaint-driven inspections throughout Michigan. These inspectors have authority to examine colonies for diseases, pests, and compliance with state regulations. While routine inspections aren't guaranteed annually for small operations, inspectors prioritize checking apiaries in areas with reported disease problems, or when colonies will be moved across state lines. During an inspection, officials examine several things: colony health and signs of disease, the presence of invasive pests like small hive beetles or varroa mites, hive construction and maintenance standards, record-keeping practices for treatments and medications, and compliance with GAMPs and local ordinances. Inspectors can issue compliance orders if they discover diseased colonies or regulatory violations. In severe cases involving highly contagious diseases like American foulbrood, they have authority to order destruction of infected colonies to prevent spread to other apiaries. Michigan law requires you to cooperate with official inspections and to follow remediation orders. If you plan to import bees from out of state, additional requirements apply. You'll need a health certificate from the state of origin and must notify MDARD before the bees arrive. This allows inspectors to examine incoming colonies for diseases that might not be present in Michigan. Strategic hive placement is both a regulatory requirement and a practical necessity. Michigan regulations approach location from multiple angles. State GAMPs provide baseline standards. Local ordinances add specific distance requirements, and good management practices ensure colony health and neighbor relations. The state's GAMAs for beekeeping address site selection primarily through nuisance prevention rather than specific distance measurements. These practices emphasize providing adequate space for flight patterns, ensuring bees have access to water sources to prevent them from congregating at neighbors' pools or pet bowls, and maintaining colonies in a manner that minimizes defensive behavior. Most Michigan municipalities with beekeeping ordinances specify minimum setback distances from property lines. Here are the common requirements. Residential property lines typically require 10 to 25 feet setbacks and often require flyway barriers. Public sidewalks need 25 to 50 feet with directional flight path considerations. Neighboring dwellings require 50 to 100 feet, sometimes reduced with barriers. Schools or public buildings require 100 feet or more, and some jurisdictions prohibit beekeeping entirely within a certain radius. These distances aren't uniform across Michigan. Rural townships impose minimal or no setback requirements, while urban areas enforce stricter standards. Flyway barriers are a key strategy in Michigan beekeeping. They serve dual purposes. They satisfy local ordinance requirements while also directing bees to fly at heights above human activity. This reduces encounters with neighbors and improves colony acceptance in residential areas. A solid fence or dense vegetation barrier, at least 6 feet tall, forces bees to fly upward before leaving your property. Property size directly influences how many colonies you can legally maintain in many Michigan municipalities. Typical formulas include lots under 6,000 square feet allow a maximum of 2 colonies. Lots between 6,000 and 12,000 square feet allow 4 colonies. Lots over 12,000 square feet allow 6 or more colonies, sometimes unlimited. These restrictions apply primarily in incorporated cities and villages. Township regulations rarely limit colony numbers on larger rural properties, though they may require increased setbacks for apiaries exceeding certain sizes. Water source requirements appear in many local ordinances, but are also fundamental to good beekeeping practice. Michigan regulations typically require providing fresh water within 10 to 20 feet of hives to prevent bees from seeking water at neighboring properties. This becomes especially critical during hot summer months when colonies need substantial water for cooling and hive health. Hive entrance orientation matters both for colony health and neighbor relations. Positioning entrances away from property lines, walkways, and neighboring outdoor living spaces reduces human-bee interactions. Many experienced Michigan beekeepers orient entrances to the southeast, capturing morning sun while avoiding prevailing winds from the west. Special considerations apply to beekeeping near certain Michigan environments. If your property borders protected wetlands, state forest land, or designated natural areas, additional restrictions may apply. Contact both MDRD and the Michigan Department of Natural Resources to determine whether environmental regulations affect your planned apiary location. Now let's shift focus to disease management, a topic with serious regulatory implications. Michigan maintains strict disease management protocols to protect the state's honeybee population from devastating pathogens and parasites. These regulations balance the beekeeper's right to maintain colonies with the broader agricultural community's need to prevent disease spread that could impact pollination services and honey production statewide. American foulbrood, or AFB, represents the most serious regulatory concern for Michigan beekeepers. This bacterial disease is highly contagious and can persist in equipment for decades. State law requires you to report suspected AFB cases to MDRD immediately. Inspectors will confirm the diagnosis and typically order destruction of infected colonies and contaminated equipment through burning. While AFB destruction orders may seem harsh, they're necessary to prevent spread to nearby apiaries. The bacteria's spores survive in honey, wax, and wooden hive components, making equipment sterilization impractical. Michigan law prohibits selling, giving away, or moving equipment from AFB-infected colonies, with violations carrying significant penalties. Here's a critical mistake many new beekeepers make. They purchase used equipment without verifying its disease history. Always ask about the equipment's origin and any past disease issues. If the seller can't provide a clear history, the risk of introducing AFB or other pathogens to your apiary isn't worth the cost savings. European foulbrood, or EFB, is less severe than AFB but still requires management attention. Michigan doesn't mandate reporting EFB, but inspectors will note its presence during examinations. Unlike AFB, colonies can sometimes recover from EFB with proper management, including requeening with hygienic stock. Varroa mites have become the primary health challenge for Michigan beekeepers. Varroa mites aren't subject to the same reporting requirements as AFB, but they pose serious challenges. These parasitic mites weaken colonies and spread viruses. State GAMPs recommend regular monitoring and integrated pest management approaches. Many local beekeeping associations offer workshops on mite monitoring techniques specific to Michigan's climate and bee populations. Michigan regulations address pesticide use in and around apiaries. If you treat colonies with medications or miticides, you must follow label directions precisely. Some treatments require withholding honey supers during application, and residue testing may occur if you sell honey commercially. Keep detailed records of all treatments, including product name and active ingredients, application date and method, dosage and duration, withdrawal periods before honey harvest, and batch or lot numbers for commercial products. The state prohibits using certain pesticides in beehives that aren't specifically labeled for apiary use. Using agricultural pesticides not approved for bee colonies violates both state law and federal EPA regulations, potentially contaminating honey and wax products. Neighbor safety concerns fall under both state GAAMPs and local ordinances. Michigan beekeepers must maintain colonies in a manner that minimizes aggressive behavior. This includes requeening colonies that show excessive defensive behavior, avoiding colony disturbance during high-traffic times in residential areas, providing adequate space to prevent crowding and swarming, and maintaining hives in good repair to prevent robbing behavior. If neighbors have documented bee allergies, some Michigan municipalities require additional precautions or may restrict beekeeping entirely within certain distances. While RTFA provides protection for normal agricultural activities, it doesn't shield you from liability if colonies create genuine safety hazards. Swarm management carries both practical and legal implications. Michigan law doesn't specifically regulate swarm capture, but allowing colonies to swarm repeatedly may violate local nuisance ordinances. Proactive swarm prevention through proper hive management demonstrates responsible beekeeping and helps maintain positive neighbor relations. Permit requirements in Michigan vary dramatically between state and local levels. State-level permits aren't required for most Michigan beekeepers. MDR doesn't charge fees for voluntary apiary registration, and even commercial operations don't pay registration fees. However, certain activities do trigger state permit requirements. Importing bees from out of state requires a health certificate and advance notification. Selling honey at farmers markets may require food establishment licensing. Commercial pollination services might require business licensing.